What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 meta decks for the January 2020 format. Now, big disclaimer before we get into this video, I want to let you guys know that this is purely my preliminary subjective thoughts on what I feel the best decks are going into this format. We don't really have any data to back this up other than like a very few small amount of sources that we can derive some sort of data from, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But the first big event we're going to have is the Pro-Play Tour Invitational, which is taking place this weekend, January 24th through 26th. So if you want to come compete in the $10,000 main event, you can come compete in the last chance qualifiers on Friday. They're just 8-man pods, and if you win those, you get your invite and you have your shot at the big money. I'll be there doing live commentary coverage, of course. Links are in the description if you guys want to pre-register if you already have your invite. So hope to see you guys there. But the thing is, once we get all the data from that event, that's going to start to set the course for what we can expect to see moving forward. And then we have Ignition Assault coming out the week after that, which isn't going to have a huge effect. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the video as we move on to that. But nonetheless, there's still a lot I want to talk about, and I kind of want to set this video as the expectation to see kind of if I was right or wrong moving in the direction that I expect the format is going to take. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Kicking things off with number 5, I actually have Hero. Now, this is a bit of an interesting one for me because Hero, I feel like, has a lot of flaws. I feel like one of the biggest flaws Heroes have is that it can be very glass cannon, whereas if that board that the turn 1 Hero player can set up gets cracked, that deck has little to no recovery, and it is very difficult for that deck to play when you get into the later stages of the game. And while yes, the boards that Hero can assemble are very powerful, I think the one reason why I decided to include it on this list at number 5 was simply due to the fact that Dark Law is a card. And Dark Law being a card, I think, matters because when you have like an in-archetype macrocosmos on legs, especially when you pair it with the other decks that I'm going to be covering in this list, I think that matters a lot. And Hero does have a lot of good things going for it. I mean, you have Malicious Bane, which is like a massive board wipe. You've got crazy cards like Dystopia, which is like basically Dryden. There's just so many just big bombs that you can drop on your opponent while you're playing Hero. Going first, it can set up big boards. Going second, it can very easily OTK, but the deck is very, very fragile, and I think that's why I didn't want to put it any higher on this list. The deck is garnering a lot of hype, and people have been testing with it and seeing a fair amount of success, so I want to go ahead and give it a little bit of respect, and that's why I made it my number 5 pick. But coming in at number 4, we have a deck that a lot of people didn't really have faith in after the ban list, but after some experimentation and some testing, I think the deck is actually perfectly, I don't want to say perfectly fine, but it's still competitive for sure, and that deck is Salim and Great. Now, when it comes to Salim and Great, the deck did lose a lot with Mirage Stallion. Mirage Stallion was like one of the big key playmakers of the deck just by taking any of your 2 level 3 Salim and Greats, overlaying into Mirage Stallion, getting the next card you need, being most of the time Jack Jaguar, and just kind of helping further facilitate your plays. And I think a lot of people are overlooking the value that Mirage Stallion provided to the deck, not as like the deck's key playmaker and extender, but also in terms of being able to go second and start bouncing your opponent's monsters back to their extra deck more often than not, kind of just acting as a pseudo source of removal. Losing that's pretty big and can actually be an obstacle that isn't really something that Salim and Great has a natural replacement for. But the thing is, when it comes to Salim and Great as a whole, the deck is just so powerful and recursive that I don't think the deck is really going anywhere anytime soon. While Mirage Stallion was a big loss, people are already starting to experiment with cards like replacing it with like Dante and like Fire Fist Lion Emperor. I mean, some people are even saying Horse Prince, but I think they're just out of their minds. The thing is though, regardless of whatever you're deciding to replace your Mirage Stallion with, when it comes down to it, you can just play Salim and Great in such a way to turbo into your Sunlight Wolf and just ensure that you can reincarnation summon that Sunlight Wolf to help you recur your resources and play that mid to long game that Salim and Great likes to play. Remember, Salim and Great is a very resource intensive deck, and what's nice about it is that as soon as your board gets broken by anything your opponent may do, it's very easy for you to reassemble it because Spinny can resurrect itself, Foxy can resurrect itself, Jack Jaguar can resurrect itself, Falco can help just continue to get back to the board and recycle your spells and traps. Gazelle is just so easy to continuously recycle, all the cards just replace themselves and you can continuously do the same thing over and over again. Losing Mirage value just makes it a little bit more difficult to get your play started. But if you're able to figure out the way to make that work, if you're able to just compensate for what the deck has in its weaknesses now, I think Salim and Great is still going to be a solid tier 1 contender, and that's why I had to give it the number 4 slot. Now coming in at number 3, I actually have 2 decks because both of these decks are very similar in their play style, and while they are different in a lot of ways, I didn't want to just dedicate 2 slots to both of these decks, and you'll understand why here in a moment. And those 2 decks are going to be Altergeist and Guru Control. Now, both of these decks like to play a very similar game. They like to play a much slower control style game. They like to play the game at their own pace, slowly dwindle the opponent out of resources and stun them under certain cards, and just essentially they're going to at some point snowball to the point where the opponent isn't going to be able to catch back up. They're going to be out of resources, and even though they're just slowly poking away with their small beaters, they will win the game eventually just through raw card advantage, and that's what these decks like to do. Now, obviously, they both do them in different ways. Altergeist is able to do it through utilizing cards like Multi-Faker, bringing out stuff like Silquidius and continuously like setting your opponent back by just tempo bouncing them with that Silquidius effect, and ensuring that you're always getting the resources you need, like your Manifestation and your just Effect Negator, all the different cards that the deck has at its disposal. While Guru Control, by comparison, I feel like is slightly better because I feel like it's more consistent. It's a lot easier to access your Subterror Guru, and being able to get Guru online, you're able to just essentially start controlling the board much more easily. You also have access to playing Floodgates that a deck like Altergeist can't play comparatively. You can play stuff like There Can Be Only One, which arguably could still be the strongest Floodgate of the format. That's yet to be determined because the format's kind of all over the place at the moment. But being able to play something like There Can Be Only One plus something like Solemn Strike or Solemn Judgment, that right there can just be enough to just clear your opponent's board and set the board at your own rate, just being able to play it as you wish. But the thing is, when it comes to both of these decks, is that when you get into games 2 and 3, the game changes drastically because the side decks are in effect, and once Ignition Assault is going to be released, Lightning Storm is going to be everywhere, and that is going to be the bane for a lot of back row decks' existence. Red Reboot did go to 1 on the /January 2020 list. However, there's still plenty of ways to deal with these back row decks. You've got Twin Twister, you've got Cosmic Cyclone, you've got Evenly Matched. I can literally go on and on with all the different forms of back row removal in the game, and Lightning Storm is just going to be another one to add to that arsenal. So I don't really want to put a deck like Geist or Guru Control much higher than this number 3 slot, because I feel like every time we get a ban list, people are really overhyping these decks. But I think when you get into the side decks, the dynamic of the game changes dramatically, and it's very difficult for these decks to play just simply because there's so many options available for players to deal with the back row and just easily clean up both of these decks. But it doesn't take away from their strengths, like Guru having access to a card like Fiendus, which you don't want to forget. So that's why I went ahead and gave Altergeist and Guru Control my number 3 slot. But coming in at number 2, oh boy, do we have a deck, and that deck is Spiral. Now, Spiral currently boasts the highest win rate percentage of any deck in the game right now on Dueling Book at the time of recording this video. I think it's at like 67 or 68%. It's just absurd. Now, Spiral is definitely a deck to be hyped at the moment. I mean, Magician's Souls, which is kind of the card that's reinvigorated the deck and given it a lot more life. Magician's Souls is running like $100 a copy here in the United States, which is just absurd, but the card really is that powerful. Being able to just access your master plan with such ease, because then it's so easy to be able to recur it from the graveyard. You can start adding copies of Rescue to your hand. There's just so many different things that Magician's Souls enables. It's level 1, so you can play cards like Where Art Thou to immediately tutor for your quick fix out of your deck. You can even take the Rescue that you search and discard it for the effect of Magician's Souls to get more cards into your hand, and you don't lose any card advantage because that Rescue can just banish to resurrect any of your spirals. The card is just absolutely absurd, and as I mentioned already, is going to take Spiral to another level. And the thing is, when you look at the way the deck can play both going first and going second, going first, it is very easy for the deck to assemble an incredibly powerful board comprising of Appaloosa. You can play stuff like Trigate Wizard and just all these different things like the old Spiral decks were able to do. Also backing that up with Spiral Sleeper, which can pop 2 cards and has built-in protection from being targeted and destroyed thanks to last last resort. It's just crazy. And then going second, the deck has so many tools at its disposal that are inherently built into the archetype, like Tough being able to pop a card, Super Agent being able to pop a spell or trap, and then you can just continuously throw away your resources into your link monsters like your Phoenix, your Unicorn, to start breaking your opponent's board. And because you have so many cards like Spiral Rescue to continuously resurrect your monsters, you can just eventually end on like a Borosaur Dragon and kill your opponent. This deck is definitely not one to be underestimated. I expect to see a lot of Spiral moving forward, and people are going to definitely have to remember how to play against this deck because, man, this deck is crazy. Now, the reason I don't have Spiral at number 1 is because the deck can inherently have a lot of bricks, and you can have some really awkward hands at times, and it can be difficult to play. This is coming from someone who used to play Spiral back in the day, so I know this, and just some of the more modern variants of Spiral just play so many cards at a time. If you don't have the correct pieces, it's very difficult for you to play. Comparatively to the OCG, they have more Spiral cards available, so it makes it a little bit easier. They have multiple resorts, they have multiple drones, they have more Spiral cards, and that helps you get to your double helix and help kind of make the deck consistent. But here, that isn't necessarily the case. The January 2020 ban list didn't give us any more Spiral cards like I had predicted, so it does have some consistency issues, but the ceiling of this deck completely outweighs those consistency flaws, and that's why I had to give Spiral my number 2 spot. Now, before I get to my number 1, I did have some honorable mentions, because the thing is, I think there is so many decks that have the potential to prove themselves right now in this open-ended format. Burning Abyss is looking really good. Pendulum's still looking fine, I think more so leaning towards the Endymion version. You've got stuff like Dinosaur, even like the Gren Maju or like the Danger decks. Like Danger Lunalight could still play even without Azathoth. It just is going to become like a rank 4 turbo deck. There are so many different strategies that have a chance to prove themselves that I'm really excited to see what people come up with, and really anything could happen. So I just want to quickly shout out those decks. I know there's plenty of others I didn't mention, so I don't want you guys to be offended if I left them out. But that is going to bring us to my number 1 deck of the January 2020 format. And if you haven't already figured it out, I'm going with Orcas. Yes, Orcas, in my opinion, is still the deck to beat. I think it's absolutely crazy that even with Harp Horror banned, that Orcas is still on top, but honestly, I still think it is really that powerful. When you have payoff cards like Dingirsu, which is one of the craziest boss monsters ever printed, also paired with a field spell like Orcas Babel, which is searchable via Galatea, like, there is just so much incentive to play Orcas, and banning Harp Horror really didn't hurt the deck as much as a lot of people think. It's so easy to just take any of your starters, such as Scrap Recycler, dump your Orcas Nightmare, banish it to go ahead and dump your Wand, and then you just bring back the Nightmare by banishing Wand, and guess what? You have the exact same combo as you did before. And yeah, you need an extender to be able to go off and do your original Orcas combo with Masquerena, ending with your Orchestrated Babel to have your multiple layers of negation. But now you even have stuff like the Phantom Knight's Rank Up Magic card back. So now you can play like a mini Phantom Knight package with Silent Boots and send that through like Cherubini and just banish that to get the Phantom Knight Rank Up Magic directly from your deck. And then you can resurrect your Dingirsu during your opponent's turn via Orcas Symbol Skeleton while you have Babel up, and you can rank up your Dingirsu into a true king of all calamities. That is just insane. And even if you decide not to go that route, I don't think it matters, because I still think with the recursive capabilities that Orcas has at its disposal, being able to play through stuff like a Masquerena plus a Dingirsu plus a Galatea that's going to search either a counter trap to disrupt your opponent during your turn, or that's going to allow you to draw essentially 3 cards on the Orcas player's following turn, it can just be overwhelming and very difficult to play through. I am shocked that Babel did not get banned, and I definitely think they're going to regret that, and that's why I've got my money on Orcas being the number 1 deck of the format. But again, it's all just my opinion. We'll just have to see what happens. I'm really curious to see what happens, not only at the Pro-Play Tour Invitational, but also the UDS taking place in Tulsa. We have YCS Las Vegas, and there's even the UDS in Bogota as well. There's a lot of events coming up, and I could not be more excited. So guys, that's gonna wrap up this video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your top decks going into this format. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, possible, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.